All right, fact check this. And Don is back for Ways of the World, and this time it's the ways that engineers piss us off. But first, we've already got a few in the comments, both on Rumble and on YouTube. So good evening, everyone. Don, how you been?
Oh, am I muted? No, there we go. Pretty good. All things considered, in true me fashion, pretty good includes that any number of things have broken and then subsequently been fixed. But hey, at least they've been fixed this time. So life's improving in that sense.
Yes, if you can get shit fixed, that's at least a step in the right direction. Especially if you're working on anything that's no. What do you think? Okay, since this is gonna be a main topic of the conversation tonight. What do you think is about the cutoff for like where vehicles started getting fucked up, where they started putting stuff in weird places where it's hard to work on or you almost impossible? Like, I've got a 13 Ram, and more or less, it's not bad. The oil filter is not in the best spot, but it's accessible.
So it's not as clearly delineated as year, right? It's like by year, by manufacturer. Because I had a 91, maybe 89 Mazda MX-6 years ago, right? And the alternator was mounted on top of the drive shaft between the motor and the firewall, right? Why would you do this to me? And the various foreign cars have always been kind of good at this, and the running joke has been like, oh, yeah, they got small hands, they'll get it, they don't care. But your early 2000s, a lot of American cars were still very livable. But was it 2012 or 13 or something like that? They started doing sealed engines. And at that exact moment that every manufacturer adopts sealed engines, like it's pretty much over. It's just...
Yeah, I feel like you can almost put a hard line on like 15. Like there were some that were late to, like I said, my Ram is the 13, and it's still mostly good. There are a couple things that are annoying, but not like, holy fuck, I can't even work on this type of thing. My wife's now former car, it was a 2019 Buick Encore. Every time I had to do literally anything on that, I wanted to push it out in the middle of the street and set it on fire. And I came really close this last time, which also kind of triggered this conversation because you had a post about this. Let me pull it back up, and we'll kind of take this as the jumping off point for this. So the society that separates its scholars from its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting by fools. That was such a perfect line for the why mechanics hate engineers. Just looking at the picture here, and then another picture that you had sent me. Let me pull that one up. This one is really great. Engineers will climb over a pile of 500 virgins just to fuck a technician.
Exactly.
And this is the one problem with the Ram is when I take the oil filter off, there's nowhere for it to go. Like you have to pull it out sideways to get it out. So now all the oil that's still in the filter, you just have to
everywhere.
You have to dump it like everywhere, and there's not like a cool little catch thing where you dump it into that and then it drains off into the no. You just dump
of course
it.
not.
It just goes wherever it goes, and you have to just get out of the way as fast as you fucking can so that you don't end up covered.
Exactly. And it's these sorts of things, like guaranteed, by the way, 100% chance that engineer was sitting there, right? And he's got his CAD program, and he's like, man, this oil filter I can't get it to fit any. Oh, if I just rotate it, then it'll fit here, and I won't have to change anything. Never occurs to this guy that this is probably the most changed part on a car, like period, right? It's going to get changed more often than everything else that's under the hood at all, anywhere in the vehicle. Just doesn't matter, right? And same thing with that starter, right? Is because I had somebody under that post be like, to be fair, like starters basically just don't go out. And I was like, it's an electric motor. It's going to go out. Like, it produces enough torque to rotate the engine, and it's like slightly bigger than your fist. Like, it's going to go out, right? It's only a matter of time, really.
I've talked about it before on other shows. I did project management for a number of years on a number of different projects when I was working in the grain industry. And we had one that the facility blew up, and they brought this engineer in. I was the project manager, and then they brought this engineer in to like figure out how to put it all together, right? And so he puts this big transition piece in that will move grain from this side of the plant to this side of the plant, and it's just all hanging up there, and it's got moving parts and shit in it. And I'm like, so when that stops working, how do I fix it? And he goes, well, it's new. You're probably not going to have to worry about that for a long time. I said, number one, it's new, which means it's going to break the second we fucking turn it on.
Right.
Number two,
if it makes it 10 minutes, I will eat my own fucking hat. All right.
Right. Number two, it's going to break. And when it does, it's not going to happen when we're slow. It's going to happen when there's a line of trucks 3 miles down the road, and they've all been sitting here since 5 o'clock in the morning, and they're pissed off. And I need to be able to fix it within 2 hours. So how am I going to fix it? He's, well, you have to get a crane in here and unhook all this and pull. I was like, no, you take it down and you rebuild it where that I can actually access it and fix it in 2 hours, not 2 fucking days after we get a crane in here. Right. And they tore the whole fucking thing down to the studs, redid it, put it all back up with a work platform and everything else. And it cost an extra $56,000, I think.
Yeah, right. But the first time it broke, it paid for itself.
Right. Right. Then you don't have to call in a crane. There was another one. So the facility had a 36-inch river belt that you loaded barges with. And he designed a 30-inch spout. Now, I know I'm not an engineer, but 36 and 30 are a little bit different. I was like, you just created a choke point. He said, no, look. And he showed me all the math on how this spout is designed to handle the volume that this belt will put out. I'm like, okay, that's really cool. I love math, but you created a choke point. Like when soybeans don't flow based on your math. Soybeans will pile up because you've now choked them down, and they're not going to go through. You're going to blow soybeans out the top of this thing, and they're going to go all over the barge. He's like, no, the math is good on this. It'll work. And put it on. Soybeans go blowing out the top of it, spill all over the barge. We have to. They wouldn't even, because we had already gone over budget on all the things I made him change because he was doing it so fucking ass backwards and stupid, that they wouldn't take the spout down and fix it. They just told us we had to run at a reduced capacity when we were loading barges. You just can't load as fast. Sorry. I'm like, thanks. You just shoot us in the fucking foot.
Good looking out, dude. Man, that's where you just accept those plans, and then you go, all right, whatever comes of this, right? You're paying for whatever happens. So when he goes, you have to load at a reduced rate. Like, okay, that means that previously it was going to take us, 1 hour to load a barge. Now it's going to take us 90 minutes. That means you're paying 90 minutes of, pay for everybody on shift, right? Or you want to fix it because I told you this was a problem.
Right. It was ridiculous. That I got lucky doing project management later on. I got to work with because I started out in maintenance work. So I started out fixing the shit that was fucked up and working with people who built grain elevators back in the 70s and 80s, who then after they got too old to keep building them went into maintenance. And so they knew how shit was supposed to run. So that was how I got trained, was this is how it actually works. So then when I go do project management and I see the way these fucking eggheads are trying to do it, I'm like, have you ever even watched how this shit works in person? Or is this all just...
And he told you so, right? So the math says this will work. right? I got a formula in engineer school, and engineer school is infallible, and you're just some fucking idiot redneck, right? And that is the answer. It is very much the same thing it is with nearly all school, right? Nearly any profession that you go to, and there are some rare exceptions, and they all involve things like Wyotech or whatever. Though I hear those guys aren't amazing, but you go to school, you spend in most people's cases 4 years there. You get to the job, and the first thing somebody tells you is forget everything you learn in school because none of it matters. That's not how we do it here, and none of that works, right? And nearly everyone I've ever met who has a BA or higher has had this exact experience. And they get there and go, what the hell did I go to school for? Why was the BA required? Right. And the answer is a bunch of academics get to sit around and go, now, I bet you it'd be more efficient if we did it this way. Yeah. We're going to, well, I could create me a math equation that says this is going to work. And so we're going to do it that way. And your average guy who's turned a wrench literally once in his entire life is going to take a look at moving, for example, a 36-inch belt down to a 30-inch fucking chute and go, do we have two of those? Because if we have two of those, I feel like we're going to be good. Is there a Y that I'm missing where this divides out? Is this how? Oh, well, but this chute is rated for a maximum. They're like, yeah, okay, whatever, man. But at the same time, look, I'm sure being an engineer, you have a tiny penis and have never tried to fit it into a tight hole, but there's difficulty if you do. That's all I'm saying. And these guys are just never going to get it. And there's a very simple reality that no matter how smart you are, if you never get your hands dirty, you can never, you never had your ass kicked, et cetera, then you're only half a human being. The flip side of this is if your nickname is Chongo because you have an IQ below room temperature, but you can bench press a Honda Civic, you're only halfway there too. I don't care which one you picked. You only get one. In relation to the appliance comment, the problem that we have in society at the moment is that this applies to everything, right? There are no things like if you look behind me right here, I am told explicitly that this structure, per various engineers, cannot stand, right? It's not going to work, and it should fall down, I don't know, 30 days or something after it was put up. And this little guy right here over the other shoulder, even worse, right? Just, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It'll never work. It'll never do what you want to do. It is currently doing what I want it to do. Now, stupid me knows the trade-offs of these things, right? This will not last 100 years. It's not intended to, but it's not going to last 100 years. And by the way, neither will your house. If you bought new construction anytime since 1970, it's a 50-year house.
I was going to say, but if we're being honest, the things that they're designing also aren't going to last 100 years. In fact, you'd be lucky if you get the 50 years out of that 50-year house.
Oh, yeah. And the thing is, right, so you get stuff like, foundation depths from when we did build 100-year houses, right? All of that calculation and estimation was done when houses were intended to last a century from the time they were built. Well, it turns out ground's going to move a lot over the course of a century. I mean, it's going to move some over 50 years, but you could say it's going to move about twice as much over a century. And so, the reality is, if you're only going to build the thing to last 50 years, you probably don't need that. Now, understand that if you build a house and intend it to only last 50 years, you better plan to bulldoze it in 50 years. Break out the excavator, dig up the foundation, start it all from scratch. And so kind of the excuse moments that we're at right now is if you have to rebuild a house, it's cheaper by a lot if you don't have to dig up the foundation. So, yeah, maybe you have to bulldoze the house in 55 years, but you don't have to put a new foundation in because the foundation should last a century as long as you did all of the things that you were supposed to do at the time. And there's no guy who's building his own house who wants to hear that, right? One of the many problems that I have had over all of my life is people will come to me with code, right? And code is almost universally written by the worst engineers that have ever existed because they're politicians and engineers, right? These are the worst people on earth. Shoot them out of a clown cannon at the sun immediately. They are a waste of space, and that's being generous. Now, the thing is, if you come to me and you say, as a few people have, right? Oh, but you can run a house off 12 gauge wire, and that's true. You can, right? You better never exceed your 1.5 amp or whatever it is per outlet, right? Like ever, because if you do, you might light the house on fire, right? You better never use any serious power tool on any of the outlets. You better never do any of the things that people who work with their hands do. Because if you do, best case scenario, you're going to flip the breaker. Absolute best, right? Worst case scenario, you're going to burn that wire out of the wall and you're going to be hand running another wire. You could simply just go down to 8 or 10, right? I think below 8 or above 8, depending on how you look at it, doesn't fit in outlets anymore. But still, you just move to whatever the max size of the outlet will accept is, and you'll be infinitely better off. But we live in this world where Energy Star says you only need, an absolute maximum 2 amps per outlet or something like that, except for your refrigerator, which, by the way, is if you've ever worked in a house while it was being constructed or being, renovated, all the power tool work is done in the kitchen because the thing you plug the fridge into is the only worthwhile outlet in the whole damn house,
Gosh, that's a whole, man, the appliances and building stuff, that's a whole other where, gosh, it's not even the engineering side of it, it's the maximization of efficiency, or really it's the managerial state. It's the managerial state of everything that we live in that is creating this shittiness where you don't have people who actually know how to do things making the decisions on how you do things. It's like if you've ever dealt with anybody from like OSHA or like a corporate safety team or safety committee, or the safety guy, they've never actually done the fucking job.
Oh, not a chance.
There was a facility just on the other side of the state that they had a kid fall off a barge. And so the safety team gets together and they put together this new program that now every time we're on a barge, you have to, not only do you have to wear your life jacket, but you also have to have these harnesses that'll hook you in so you can hook onto the barge so that you can't fall off. I was like, okay, you've created all kinds of additional bullshit that creates new hazards that didn't exist before. And like, I'm like, have you ever actually like gotten on a barge and just walked around the edge? Because you just have enough room to walk around the edge and not fucking fall off. You don't have room for all this extra shit hanging off of you that's now going to get snagged on stuff. Or now if I do fall off, God forbid, now I'm stuck hanging there. I would rather hit the water and have a swimmer's chance of getting away from the barge before it comes back into the cell and crushes me than just be stuck hanging there off of this fucking noose that you've fixed for me. And now I'm going to get crushed when the barge slides back in. And I talked to our safety team about that. I was like, have you ever even seen how this practically works? And they were like, well, no, it seemed like a good idea. I was like, because you're a fucking moron. I said, yeah. What you should have done if you had balls is, because the guy who fell off the barge directly violated part of his training. I said, you should have fished his ass out of the water, fired him on the fucking spot, and then we all moved on. But instead, you created new rules to accommodate somebody's dumbassery instead of doing the thing that you should have done. Hello, managerial state. Hello, another part of what we were talking about before the show. That's not part of this conversation exactly, but it's the weak men thing. Instead of being strong and saying and doing the right thing and saying, all right, you violated a direct, that's a direct safety violation. You're fucking fired. Goodbye.
So here it is, the problem, right? Because let's rehash the entire conversation. Once, for those who have worked in any real profession on Earth, you have heard those that can't do teach, right? Now, those that can't teach go into, well, let's call it the managerial state, which I despise as an entirely academic term from people who have never done the thing, right? And this is the problem, right? Once you have a job where safety is a foregone conclusion, right? When you sit in an office and read paperwork all day, the most dangerous thing that could reasonably happen, this list is paper cuts, carpal tunnel, sciatica, right? These things are all 50-year problems of having sat in a chair and never fucking done anything with your life, right? Oh, I need lumbar support because I've been sitting like this reading paperwork for 45 years, right? I didn't know what good posture was, and so now I really need a lumbar support pillow. And what is the first thing that those people do? They create all this ergonomic horse shit for their job, right? Oh, I need a standing desk that can go up and down. One of the, right? I need what are those stupid pads that they put right in front of keyboards, right? The little wrist support so you type like this with, right? All this kind of stupid shit, because none of that safety crap interferes with their job in the slightest. And so as a basic mindset, they see somebody died. Outside of a shooting, people, or jumping out of an office window, people don't die in office jobs. They just don't. That or being, 100 years old and dying from a heart attack. The safety is a foregone conclusion. If you're there, nobody's going to die. That's just how it is, right? Something truly absurd or edge case has to happen. And so when they see a guy that does a job that inherently has some danger in it died, they go, oh, well, safety is insured in my job. And this is the problem of having your thinking done by cowards, right? Cowardice is not just the willingness to get shot at and do something. It's not the willingness to pick up a sword at the time that it was said, right? If you are a coward, you are running around absolutely terrified, generally speaking, of life, right? Hey, look, right now, this very minute, we are working on doubling the cost of all small and mid-sized table saws, because the safety board in charge of this heard that there's 40,000 injuries per year with table saws. And of course, the only thing that they discuss is amputations, because as it turns out, when you have a blade spinning at like 5,000 RPM, if you touch that blade, you can lose a finger, right? You don't even need it to be a blade. At 5,000 RPM, just a disc will take off plenty of your finger if you sit there and poke at the damn thing. There's not a way to stop this, right? But we have decided that there is. And so we are going to put a $700 brake and blade retraction system in a $600 saw. And somehow or another, that's not going to impact the price in any meaningful way per these douchebags, right? Now, for any of you who have ever been on a job site, there is a job site saw. It is not a full-size table saw, because you probably don't have a full shop in the back of a semi-trailer that you tote around with you, that you plug in, and thus get to do whatever you want with a generator that is, putting out 8,000 watts so you can actually run all this stuff. It's not a thing that most construction companies have. By companies, I mean most of them are like 2 to 3 guys, right? Let's be honest here. It doesn't matter, right? It is irrelevant to these people because there are 40,000 injuries per year. And if you tell that to an academic, they go, oh my God, think about the cost in the medical system and all this stupid bullshit, because they live in a world that is safe. And even if you can get them to talk about it and find out that it's like sub 100 actual amputations per year, and otherwise it's just stitches and, guys that get cuts and what have you, that doesn't matter, because they don't get stitches in their job, right? There is no, I went to the office today and I got a super bad paper cut and I had to get a stitch. Just one, right? That doesn't happen. On the other hand, go look at guys who work with their hands. All of us. Shit. I have cut myself plenty of times where people told me I need stitches, and generally speaking, I needed duct tape, right? It's just a simple reality that, by the way, the game, just the game. Oh, but you need stitches. No, I need a pain tolerance, rubbing alcohol, and duct tape, right? Shit. I wasn't even working with my hands. A handful of years ago, I was working in an office, funny enough. Got drunk, screwing around, ripped off one of my toenails. Didn't notice until I went to go take a piss, looked down, there's just blood all over the place. Damn it. So I jammed it was my pinky toe, jammed my pinky toe into the ground, finished pissing, left, grabbed some peroxide and rubbing alcohol out from under my sink, poured that shit all over it, grabbed my duct tape and went, yeah, around my toe. And the next day, as it turns out, shockingly, my foot was sore. And so I was limping a little uncomfortable on the one foot. There's a lady that was working with me. Oh, what happened to your foot? Oh, I told her the same story I just told you. And she said, oh my God, I'm an RN. You might get botulism. And it lists off all this long list of shit. Yeah, but I'll be fine. It sucks. It will suck for anywhere between 2 and 5 more days. Then, it will be nice and healed over. A scab will fall off and the toenail will regrow sometime in the next month. I don't really give a shit. Oh, no, you need to go to the hospital right now. They need to give you antibiotics. Just for clarity's sake, I never went to the hospital. I never got antibiotics. None of this shit happened, right? Because if you've ever injured yourself, basically ever, for any reason at all, or been injured, you're pretty aware that none of that shit's required. But it is this safety culture that can only exist for people who have spent their entire lives in a safe environment. No one grow up spending time outside, right? As a kid, I was riding a bike, the most dangerous of all activities. Got knocked off my bike by an idiot cousin of mine, landed in a bunch of rocks, tore up my arm, something fierce, blood running down my arm. And so I got up and went, all right, go home and tell mom that I'm coming because she's going to need all the disinfectants and shit. And I get the feeling I'm going to be riding home slow. So cousin takes off. I get home and mom is like charging out the door, right? Like, oh my God, thank God you rolled up. I thought we were going to have to go to the hospital or something. No, it's road rash and it's not good. Right? So I sat down on the couch and you know what happened? My mom sat there and picked out all the rocks with fucking tweezers, threw some hydrogen peroxide over it, and then covered it with damp paper towels so that it would just sit there while she cut enough shit to fucking tape it closed. I didn't die. All right. And the thing is, this exact kind of mentality is just entirely missing from those who go, oh, I'm going to go to school, then I'm going to go to college, then I'm going to spend more years in college, and then I'm going to go work in an office. These people are giant pussies, right? And so you have your thinking done by cowards, right? And for all of the discussion that's going on over there, right? I caught the, appliances used to last 50 years. Now they last 5. Well, the idea that you have to be reselling every couple of years is a coward's mentality, right? If I sell you a fridge and it lasts for 50 years, I can't sell you another fridge in 5 years. And so what could happen? We might not make as much money, which is basically a bitch's mentality, right? If you're selling an earth-sized quantity of refrigerators, you're going to be okay, right? It just, period. Somebody is going to have one fall off a truck, right? Some percentage of these things are going to get hit by lightning. Tornadoes are going to destroy some. You will perpetually have a market. And if by some miracle you make a fridge so sturdy that it can fall off a truck, get hit by lightning, and fly through a fucking tornado, then yes, maybe you will put yourself out of business. I don't believe that thing even can exist, but hey, if you get there eventually, one day in a century from now, you might put yourself out of business. Now, in the meantime, you might not make as much money, which is what everybody's excuse is, right? These crap bag appliances fall apart a lot easier than older ones, and they're cheaper to make. Therefore, now I can sell it to you twice, right? But that too is the sign of a coward, right? Somebody who was sure enough of themselves to go, hey, no, we're just going to literally make the best fridge that ever was, and we'll sell that to everybody. And then, what we're going to do is we're going to make something else. That something else is going to be great, right? And then we'll sell that to everybody, right? Oh, but what if we never make anything other than this fridge? Cowardice. Just period, right? And on and on and on this goes. Equal problem, right? Just on the opposite side. You're fighting done by morons, right? In actual fighting, it's pretty clear why this is bad. There's a simple reality that since weapons have existed, while strength is important, it is not the only or deciding factor in every circumstance. So you got to have somebody who can think as well as do the killing, right? And if you don't believe that's still the case, go listen to the Soft guys. They talk regularly. They want to find nerds that they can get jacked, and they want to find jacked guys that they can make nerds. If you can fill one of the two of that combination, you will be fine, right? So much so, I have a friend of mine who talks to a lot of these guys, a lot of the heavy operator types. He said, it's really wild. It was his second or third interview talking to these guys, and as he's talking, it strikes me he could have done anything he wanted in this world. He could have been a doctor. He could have been, and that particular guy has a doctorate, but he made a choice to do this. He didn't, all the propaganda is bullshit. These guys weren't just shuffled in there because they're idiots. And the thing is, this problem is equally true. And by the way, if you've ever worked on a job site, right, you have met this guy. The guy that every day you're trying to explain how to use a hammer or a screwdriver or, God forbid, a power tool, right? And you're like, man, I've explained this to you 15 times. How do you not understand this? Now, you don't have to be a Mensa member to pound nails. That's just not the case, and it's never going to be. But you should be smart enough to look at a thing and go, yeah, I get how that works, right? And be able to work on it from there. Now, I know I've previously mentioned sealed engines, and there's a simple reality that once there's literally a giant piece of plastic in the way, you can't look at it, right? But you should be able to look at the seal and go, oh, I know how to get through that, right? And it shouldn't be, well, I have a sawzall and angle grinder, right? I will get through no matter what. Are there times? Yes, but that should not be the default answer. And look, man, I love the memes as much as everybody else. Hey, if you're going to be a pain in the ass, there's a mechanics meme that rolls around that's like, I got a ratchet. It says please, and then I got a wrench, and it says I'm asking nicely, and then there's impact hammer, and it says I'm telling you. It goes on and on. There's 5 or 6 of these things. It gets down to a blowtorch, and it says I wasn't asking, right? But you should equally have that escalation capability, right? Like, oh, we start out with the ratchet because it will do 9,000% of the work most of the time. Okay, let's get the wrench because it'll tolerate more torque. And by the way, if you don't know that's the difference, you should. All right.
There have been a lot of interesting and good comments coming in on Rumble and also on YouTube. These going back to the proper way to deal with injuries and stuff. Accidentally squeezed a grinder when putting away, gonna have a nifty scar. I've got a nice one right there on my arm. I was renovating a house, our second house in Mississippi, and I was carrying too much shit all at once, and I had the drill in my hand with the fucking bit still in it, and I slipped and went to catch the shit and accidentally squeezed the trigger and went whoop, and just ran a nice hole in my arm. I set everything down. Once I got to where I was going with it, set everything down, ripped my sleeve off, tore it off, and then just tied it up around it and went on about doing my shit because I was, working on the house. I wasn't going to the fucking hospital for, drilling a hole in my arm. Fuck that. So my dad shows up, but my dad shows up 30 minutes later. He's like, what's up with your sleeve? Why is it on your arm? I was like, I drilled a hole in my arm. I'm fine. I think it stopped bleeding now. Took the sleeve off. It had not stopped bleeding. Tied it back up a little tighter and just kept going. He's like, don't you want to stop? I'm like, no, that's not necessary.
I'm busy right now.
Yeah, there's shit that's got to get done. We're moving in next week. This is all got to be finished. I can't I ain't got time for a hospital visit.
Right. Is there something that needs to be sewed back on? Because generally speaking, that's a good time to go to the hospital, right? Was there a loud snap when a joint bent the wrong direction? Also a good time to go to the hospital, right? But you got a pinhole in you. Yeah, but it's also not 1450, all right? like I have various antiseptic things, not the least of which, and I've never done it personally, but I have watched guys get a nice cut in the middle of a shop, grab brake cleaner, and go, shh, it's disinfected. Ooh. And I went, you are out of your damn mind. That shit burns on your skin. You know?
Well, but I mean, like
it worked.
This sort of stuff, it goes back to the having nerds running safety departments that have never actually done anything. We had a guy that we did our like pre-shift kickoff, and he walks out of the cafeteria or the like break room to go out to his job. He has his safety glasses on. Like he put them on before he walked out the door, and a fucking bug flew under the safety glasses in his eye and stung his eyeball. And so then we have to like take him to the emergency room because like now he's got there's bad shit happening.
His eyeballs popping out of his head.
Yeah. And so then like the safety team is like, well, how do we prevent this? I'm like, kill every fucking bug on the planet. Otherwise, accident and move on. Why are we talking about how do we prevent this from happening again? Are you going to make everybody wear fucking goggles? Because everybody's going to quit. Like nobody's wearing goggles just to literally walk out of the safety room. Like, but that's like you were talking about. They live in a completely secluded, safe environment where they never have to worry about walking outside and getting stung by a bug. So whenever somebody does get stung by a bug, now how do we prevent this? Kill every bug on the planet. And if you figure out how to do that, more power to you, especially the stingy ones. I hate those fuckers. So go for it. But
that's the thing, right? Is and I've been singing this tune for a long time. Universalism is the enemy, right? At some point in life, you are gonna have to come to the conclusion that shit happens, right? And some of that shit is bad. All right. How do we stop a guy from dropping a brick on his foot? Right? You don't. Right? There, one time you're going to pick up 5 bricks. Well, there's the answer. Just don't pick up 5 bricks. Just pick up one at a time. Like, it's a brick this big. 5 is not even that many. Like, what? Oh. Well, how much time could it add to pick up 1 brick at a time? In transportation of material, 5 times as long. Just so as you know. Right?
My favorite one, I was running a bush hog in an open field. No trees, nothing. Just me on a bush hog, open field. And the safety guy comes like rolling out there. And he jumps up on the side of the tractor and he's like, aren't you supposed to be wearing a hard hat? It's like, for what? If something falls out of the sky and hits me, I'm fucking dead no matter what. Like, why would I wear a hard hat on a tractor in the middle of an open field? If something falls from space, the hard hat's going to be the only thing that's left. I'm getting vaporized. So, no, I'm not wearing a hard hat to bush hog an open field.
There'll be a hard hat sitting on a tractor in a blood splatter. Right. But this is the thing is if you don't have that sequestered environment, right, then you can't have the mentality safety first. And I'm not exactly singing a new song here. There's a guy who's been on a 40-year crusade that he calls safety third, right? Well, I don't know. It's probably only been 20 years, right? And to which is, I've seen a lot of people ask him, what comes first and second? He says anything but safety, right? And for reference, that's Mike Rowe, if by some miracle you don't know. And he has been right every step of the way. Now the thing is, what he is talking about is this generalized cowardice that goes around that, to the not what this show is about, but discussed off air kind of things. My favorite term ever, by the way, in show business, as we were discussing off air, weak men. Right? What precisely makes people a weak man? And it's cowardice. Right? I don't care. You could have a guy who's 6 feet tall and 400 pounds of rippling muscle. If the moment he encounters any adversity that's not lifting a weight, the first thing he does is look at the ground and cry, he's still a coward. Right? And equally, if he's a dumbass, that's not helping either. Right? And I know this is the internet, and specifically this part of the internet. Dodd, IQ is heritable. There's nothing that you could do about it. So if you've got a 76 IQ guy, the best you could hope for is that he's gonna do that weightlifting. And that okay, fine. Let me grant you the premise, even though no matter how many times Jordan Peterson says it, IQ, while it may or may not be a bracket of inheritance, is not a fixed number. Right. I know. I pissed off this entire portion of the internet. But as it turns out, there's plenty of places you could look to find that out if you wanted to. But instead, let's take our 76 IQ moron here who could lift the weights. 76 IQ moron also could do things to improve his capabilities, even intellectually. Even if all that means is that asshole sets an alarm on presumably one of these fucking things that says, hey, it's this time, do this thing. Now, 76 IQ moron doesn't have to be any smarter than he already was to do that. He just needs to be able to read, which presumably he can do at least to some degree, right? And he needs to look at his phone. That's it, right? And by the way, he could even go, we could improve this moron's life substantially more because, again, somehow or another, he can't learn, unlike everybody else who's ever been born. We could have someone smarter than him write shit in his phone for him to do. I don't know. And by the way, well, how is that going to make how is that him being smarter? He could walk up. He could know he's a complete retard and go, hey, I am self-aware enough to know that I'm retarded and you're not. Can you write things in my phone and set alarms? Things that I need to do that I can't think of right now, but you know I need to do, so that my phone rings and it says, hey, do this thing. Wow. Now he acts like a guy with at least an 85 IQ, right? My God. But this is the implication that self-improvement in either of these arenas is a good idea. And by the way, I am very aware that the internet, specifically this corner of the internet, is, oh, just pick up the heavy thing, bro. Okay, cool. Pick up the heavy thing. Not here to tell you not to lift weights. Stop being a pussy.
I don't know if I should feel a little bit offended or not. I actually do have an alarm in my phone that says, work out, you fat fuck. It goes off at 9:30 every morning. So this is when I was in appliance repair school, the dumb hick who grew up poor was way more intuitive than me and the other nerd. Dumb hicks have certain intuitive nature about them where things like that are involved and can be coached in the right direction. Okay, why doesn't it seem to work the other way? Like, you can take a dumb fuck who doesn't seem to grasp a whole lot, and through steps you can get them to grasp things. If you take somebody that's really smart, really smart,
yeah,
you take somebody that's really smart and work them backwards to try to grasp those same things, doesn't work. They can't figure out the less intellectual, more just doing things side of things. Like you can, and I've seen this with like the safety nerds. You can explain it to them in great detail. Like, this is how this actually works and why the thing that you want to do doesn't. And it's just like you have created something that didn't exist and they can't even fathom or comprehend where you got that from. Whereas if you take a basic dumbass and you're like, all right, these are the steps that we do to get from point A to point B on this. Like, okay, I can get from point A to point B.
So there are two answers, and neither one works alone, as far as I can tell. Humility and gratefulness, right? So you take your average dumbass and you explain something to him, and he is grateful, right, and humble enough because he knows he's an average dumbass. Everybody's been telling him his whole fucking life, right? Grateful that you are taking the time to explain this to him. So he's paying attention. He's trying to learn what it is that you have to teach him. You take that super smart intellectual guy that everybody's been telling his whole life that he is a turbo genius. And so, first of all, how dare you interrupt my genius with your stupid explanation of basic bitch activities. But second of all, if I don't understand this immediately, then it's not worth understanding, right? And so, no matter how much you try to explain to this genius, this bookworm nerd that fucking has never done anything in his whole life that's real, but has been told every day, like, and OSHA guys are notorious for this, you guys are saving lives out there. You guys are doing great things, right? You know, people have fingers because of your job, man. Right? They have this greater purpose that is the most important thing in the whole goddamn world. And so understanding that you can't just go, safety first, is actually an impedance to this idea that they have this greater idea, right? And they are just simply not humble enough to understand that safety is not the only thing on the planet. Even if you said safety first, presumably that means something is second, but not with these assholes, right? It doesn't matter. It like, well, you know, if we could just stuff you in a giant rubber ball all the time, then my job would be a lot easier. And I've heard fucking safety guys say shit like that. Like, yeah, anybody get any work done that way? Like any work done that way? And I don't even care what your job is. If you're just sitting in a giant rubber ball, okay, fine. You're bubble wrapped. You're immune to getting hurt. On the other hand, do literally anything like that, right? And these guys, safety's the most important thing in the world. It's the only priority. Like, no, it isn't. And stop it, right? And so this general attitude of these guys, right? So to the chat's point, Dumb Hick was much more intuitive than us. First of all, Dumb Hick has probably been out there, Dumb Poor Hick specifically, been out there like, all right, well, I got me a set of tools and I got a bunch of gear that's been here since 1920 because we can't afford to replace any of it, but I can afford to replace a bolt if it shears, right? And so what did Dumb Hick learn? All right, you're out in the middle of the field and you shear a bolt. Well, baling wire will get me back to the shop. All right. So what does he do? He baling wires whatever that bolt is, right? Whatever it was adhering is now baling wired together, drives back to the shop. What does he then do? He goes out and gets a new bolt. Well, it turns out it didn't shear off in any convenient place. So about halfway down, he's got to go, drill that whole thing out. So he has a different tool, one that is specifically made for this. It's got little reverse cutters in it, so you can stick it on a bolt and hit it with an impact, and it will pull that thing out, right? He had to learn all this shit. He had to spend his time going, well, look, maybe I never get to go to electrical school, but I got a multimeter. We're going to figure it out because I have to. Now, for all the people who live in safety land, right, they tend to be substantially wealthier than being poor. If you blow a tire on the side of the road, you call AAA. If the guy who hasn't had insurance ever in his entire life blows a tire on the side of the road, he jacks that bitch up and gets the spare out of the trunk that he checks once a month because he knows he doesn't want to be stranded on the side of the fucking road. All right.
Yeah, that
is a long way to say necessity is the mother of invention, but people say that and very clearly don't understand it, right? You need to figure out how to do this because guess what? If not, you're not going to eat. Okay, well, then I'm going to figure out how to do it because I don't have a choice. There's not a cell phone that I can pick up. God forbid, dumb rednecks that grew up in the 90s or super early 2000s and they were poor. They didn't have cell phones. They didn't even know anybody with a cell phone except a local drug dealer. He had a cell phone, right? Those guys were not calling anybody if their car broke down, right? These are the guys that are happy to tell you the mix rate between piss and water to make sure that your blown radiator doesn't rust out on the way home, even though it's pouring piss and water down the front of your vehicle, right? And guess what they're going to do when they get home? Grab the cheap pressure washer nozzle off their hose and go, this fucking sucks, right? Because they needed to, and you didn't. And you don't need to develop that intuition about how things work if you can always just pick up the phone and call somebody. And by the way, for every one of these intellectual douchebags out there who's going, well, I don't need to know how to do that. I am very smart and make a lot of money, and so I just call someone. Okay, that's fine. You are the coward, right? You are the moron to all of these people who can work with their hands. It's just true. Every single person who advertises that they can't, not don't, can't change oil or tires, right? All the rest of us just laugh at you. And I know, but I make money. And okay, well, look, dear section of the internet that thinks the collapse is happening tomorrow, please tell me how your, doctorate in a forgotten language is going to help you when that happens. All right, is that what are you going to do? Break it out like a force field? And by the way, I have a friend who is a lawyer who, right after he got his law degree, was like, Juris Doctorates are in fact a force field. You just pointed at things, and then those things can't hurt you. And he was kidding, but this is how these people behave, and it was the joke that he was making. It was, I'm a lawyer. I'm a gunman. What? Okay. If you live to sue me, this could suck. You know what that tells me? Mag dump.
So talking about the can't versus don't, that's part of what triggered this conversation to begin with. There are certain things that I don't think there's anything on a vehicle I can't do, but there are a lot of things that I will not do if I can pay somebody else to do it and not fuck with it. And don't met have to, because my mechanic down the road went out of town for the weekend to go camping with his family, and instead of letting me get my wife's car in for him to change out that alternator belt that he had told me earlier in the week he would get to before the end of the week. So I got to get this thing running because I want my truck back. My wife had been driving my truck all week. So I pull in the shop and come to find out that the motor wasn't actually sitting on anything. It was just being suspended by a couple little mounting brackets that attach to the frame. So when you have to take the entire mounting bracket apparatus off to get to the belt. And when I take it off, now the motor goes whoop, and everything's plastic. There's nothing to like put a jack on because everything underneath is enclosed, except for where the oil pan sticks out, like a square that's about that.
Just jack it up on the oil pan. It'll be fine.
Yeah, square that's about that big where the oil pan sticks out underneath there. It's like, well, fuck. So anyway, I have some nice scars on my arm, and I'm a week and a half later. My back is finally not feeling terrible, where I just like got in there and wrenched that motherfucker up and threw a bolt in it, and then went from there. Man, like I can't imagine the situation that people who don't know how to do anything put themselves in. Like, I mean, not that we wouldn't have been hurting or anything. I need my truck at some point, and I can't, my wife needs to have her own car at some point. We can't just keep, especially with the way our schedules are and everything, and kids and everything else. Like, people that don't know how to do anything, and it's a coward's way out. It's like, how am I going to be able to do that? And like they have the another thing we were talking about before the show. They have that persistent victim mentality. Nothing ever goes their way. Nothing ever goes right. They're always something's always going wrong. It's like, maybe learn how to fucking do something, and then you can take control of your own situation, and things don't have to be shitty for you all the time.
Well, that's the other side, right? Is that this is another line of what cowardice looks like, right? If it's all on you, then there's not a lot of excuses to be made, right? If you don't know how to do something and it's all on you, then it's time to go learn how to do something, right? If if all you do is just call somebody, right? Not because they have equipment you don't have, right? I mean, you're not going to learn how to become a crane, all right? That's not a viable option. You're not going to learn to become a bulldozer, okay? Now, granted, you can do a lot of work that bulldozers do with a shovel, but maybe it's time dependent and that's just not viable. So fine, go rent a bulldozer, right? Or hire a guy that runs a bulldozer. On the other hand, you want to find out the difference between renting a bulldozer and hiring a guy that runs a bulldozer? Because I promise you the price difference is staggering. Right? Now, that does mean you're going to have to go learn how to drive a bulldozer, right? And you're probably not going to be learning in the most ideal conditions. Do something, do anything. Probably the most hated piece of advice I've ever handed out, right? Because the implication is that you can do something, right? It doesn't matter what it is. Do something. Now, people always want to take this piece of advice in hand only when something goes wrong, right? Oh, well, what happens if I rewire my house and it doesn't work? Like, well, then the first thing you do is figure out why it didn't work. Well, but I might end up without power for like 2 days that way. Like, you might, but you know what's going to happen if you end up without power for 2 days? You're never going to end up without power again. I promise you, you're going to learn some shit while you're fixing that. All right? There's not a lot of things that could stop you from being out of power for 2 days or stop you from having power for 2 days. It's just isn't. So you're going to learn. You're going to learn a lot. But the other option is just call the electrician, right? Pay somebody else an amount of money that, by the way, most of you who are bitching about this will never make in your life, right? You're paying that electrician $90 to $150 an hour, right? Okay. Well, what do you get paid? How many hours could you be working on this before it was more expensive for you to take the time off work than it was to hire the electrician, right? And by the way, do you get the information? Do you spend the rest of your life knowing how to solve this problem? Or do you spend the rest of your life knowing how to call an electrician, right?
It's funny you mentioned but what if it doesn't work? There was a facility I worked at in Mississippi. The company sent out these brand new machines that were for our grading rooms that would sort the grain. And as soon as we got it in, took it out of the box, set it on the counter, I started taking it apart. And the facility manager's like, whoa, what are you doing? I was like, I'm going to take this bitch apart. He said, but what if you can't put it back together? I said, then we put it back in the box and send it back and tell them it was defective and have them send us another one. I was like, this thing is going to stop working at some point. I need to know how it functions so that when it stops working, I can take it apart, fix it, and put it back together so that we're not stuck in a position where, in the middle of grain harvest when everything's fucking busy and crazy, this thing stops working and now we can't do a basic function of our job until they send us a new one.
7 days till you get a new one. I'm sure that will be cheap. By the way.
And you know what? It came in handy because like we got into harvest and there was we had like it had rained a whole lot and the beans were a lot wetter than they usually were. And so they wouldn't feed through this thing the way that they normally would with good, like dry grain. Yeah. And so it would get plugged up and it like the thing that turned on the inside and it, like all of the shit would get gummed up. And so I could take it apart, pull everything out, clean it out, get it back running. No problem. But because on day one, as soon as it came in, I got out tools and just started tearing this bitch down. It's like, let's see how this thing operates. And like, I don't know. Is it just a sense of curiosity or maybe a sense of cowardice of, oh man, but what if I can't put it back together? I'm like, send it back, put it back in the fucking box and tell them it's defective. That's it.
Well, so the cowardice is what prompts the question, but it also kills the curiosity, right? And we breed this into people. It'd be, I think, getting your Wayback Machine, fellow old man, go to the third grade. The person who asked the question's an idiot, right? Oh, what are you asking questions for? Just shut up, right? Okay. Well, so we spend all of school, government type, telling people not to ask questions, not to want to know more. And God forbid you ask a question that is not, I don't understand how to do the precise thing that you're saying. You say something, ridiculous like, hey, this topic is interesting. Tell me more. Then a whole room full of retards who don't want to be there go, oh my God, that's terrible. Shut up. I don't want to be here any longer. Right. Not as though they're going to be there longer anyway. right? Well, I could be sitting in class with my thumb in my ass because we're done with work for the day, or the teacher could still be talking, right? And by the way, plenty of people do this to their kids, right? I want to know. Well, I'll tell you when you're older. When does older hit? Because I'm pretty sure I am still waiting on some shit that my parents told me that they would tell me when I was older, from when I was like 6. It's 35 years ago. All right, you know, like when does that day come? And look, sometimes it's not the appropriate time to ask a question. My kid asked me something. I was backing up my Jeep via tow chain through a bunch of shit off of my tractor that my wife was driving, and he thought that was the exact moment to like ask me about the fuel system of the Jeep. And I was like, "You're gonna wait till I'm done, all right?" Like, but then when I was done, it was time to answer the question, right? It's not, I'll explain this to you when you're 41. And so we breed into people that there's social ostracization for wanting to know more. And so they try not to, right? And equally speaking, we tell people that even having the capability to work with your hands is for, the dirty pores or whatever. And the output of this is that we watch stupid people, and I do mean that, stupid people, say things like, well, my grandfather could work on a car, read a book, and, fix the plumbing in the house. He was very well learned. And that is just lost. Like, well, look, you academic fuckface, go work with something. Go work with your hands on something, and it will be not lost to you. You will be demonstrating that thing that is supposedly revered. And by the way, dear retards of the world that only work with your hands, who equally lament that these things are lost, go read a fucking book. All right? Not a comic book. Go read an actual book that will teach you something. Go, as I so long ago told a guy who was working for me, like, look, man, you spend 12 hours a day on fucking YouTube, and at no time in your life have you watched an instructional video? Come on. Like, you complain that you don't know how anything works. It turns out there are millions of fucking people out there explaining to you how shit works on a daily basis. And by the way, as I have lamented on my own channel recently, there are no advanced anythings on the internet. People, for whatever reason, don't seem to want to do that. That is what I'm telling you. You personally need to learn to make wire. Whew, that's a throwback. But look, I understand there's no advanced anything, but that being the case, you can find an introduction to woodworking tutorial or series of them in 15 minutes. You can find an introduction to plumbing in 15 minutes, right? You can find how to change brakes in 15. And by the way, I am going super long here. This is probably more like 15 seconds. All right. If you have some really super obscure car, it might take you 15 minutes to find somebody who's changing out a part on that. All right. But if you have a Honda Civic, like, I am fairly certain between any number of YouTube tutorials, you could tear a Honda Civic down from it sitting in your driveway to its component parts, all of them individually, single bolts, and then put it all back together. So if you're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, I don't know how to work with my hands, well, go do that, right? And equally, by the way, all of the super popular nerdy YouTube channels, that Veritasium guy, while he might be kind of a douchebag sometimes, is there to explain to you all kinds of weird shit. Right? So by all means, go forth. Be interdisciplinary. Now, I know. Dawn, I don't have time for that, right? That's true. You're probably watching, if you're that guy in particular, 10 hours a day of, how the Martians are impregnating white people to make black people in Antarctica or something. And look, I'm not telling you not to watch that. By all means. I'm just saying space that shit out a little bit with making yourself slightly better.
Do something, do anything seems to be the really solid advice from a pretty solid advice giving guy, especially on this topic. Like we started out talking about the engineering marvels of how fucking retarded the way that they put shit together is. But at the same time, you can learn how to work on that retarded shit, and you might even be able to make it do something that makes it a little more manageable for you next time. Man, our last house, I redid a lot of stuff in that house, and I don't know what fucking moron put half of that shit together to begin with. But after I tore all of that dumb shit out, I put it back in where the next time it needs to be done, it's very like straightforward, boom, boom, here you go. So when my stepson, who now lives in the house, has to deal with this hopefully in 20 years, he, instead of having to tear all of this shit out and redo it, can just go boom, boom, done, move on, and not spend half a day hunting down parts and everything else to make it work. So, just a little bit of ingenuity and know-how not only will make your life a little more smooth in the short term, but also it can make it go a lot better in the long term.
So, not to digress wildly, but let's digress wildly. I cannot imagine the number of people lamenting that things, that nobody cares about anything, right? And one, if you're going to hand a house over to your kid, then you're much more likely to make sure that it is useful and functional and not held together by duct tape and chewing gum, right? Because you know who you're handing it to, you care about that person. And look, I'm not saying that you individually, dear viewer who is sitting there right now, are literally going to change the entire planet by at least pretending like you care, right? Going out of your way to try and do things right. But I can promise you that if you start doing it, other people will become interested in what you're doing and want to duplicate it, because people know naturally they don't need any help or instruction. Like, oh, hey, man, that guy is doing something. It is clearly a demonstration of skill, and he's clearly doing it right. I wonder what he's doing, right? And don't get me wrong. I know we've discussed a lot of like baling wire bolt holes together, and yeah, that'll get you home, right? But that's not the right answer. Skilled work is beautiful in the end.
You know what's really fun with that is, and I had forgotten about this before you started talking about, that you're going to be passing that on. And so when my stepson, who now lives in our old house, first moved in with us, we built walls and partitioned off part of the basement so that he would have his own room. And he and my son helped me do that. They helped with framing it all up. They helped with getting it all mounted and put up and everything. Like they put the we didn't get drywall. We had some like panel board stuff that was good for just like sticking posters and shit on. And that's, it's a fucking 15-year-old's room. What else is he going to do with it? So, we built walls. Before he moved in, we had a major flood in that house and destroyed the basement. So had to have all the water pumped out, gutted and stripped down the entire basement, just tore it all down to the studs, and had to have it, cleaned and everything. So when he moved in, I was like, the basement is just like, it's stripped down to the studs. There's nothing down there. And he goes, it's fine. He said, I will frame it up and put it all back together the way I want it, because I remember how to do that from when we built my room when I first moved in. Like, exactly. That's fucking awesome.
And that, by the way, for those of you who are wondering what it looks like on the other side of A, learning to do this shit, and B, teaching it to somebody else, it looks like that. It looks like, hell yeah, man. Yeah. Yes. The answer is no longer that somebody is going to call you to do simplistic shit. And on and on and on. And by the way, I'm going to frame up the whole room the way I want it is a lot of work, but it is not complicated, right? You're not.
I had fully expected that I would spend a couple weeks over there reframing up and rewalling the basement and getting it all put together. And he was like, no, I don't need you. I know how to do it, and I know exactly the way I want to lay it out and how I'm going to set it all up. Like I've got this. Like,
yeah.
Okay. Well,
sold, man. Sold.
Cool.
But that's another thing, right? For all of you who will complain to me that modern architecture sucks, right? And this is right along the same line. Now you know that when you look at it, you don't like it, right? But you have no skill to say what it is that would look good. You can look at something else that you know looks good and go, okay, that looks good, right? How are you going to have any impact on this if, even God forbid, you came across the capability to build your own house and the only thing you could do, hire a contractor? What do you think he's going to build you a palace? Probably not. Most of those guys are rightly going to tell you, look, even if you want to do that, it's going to be like $25 million. So cash up front, So, hey, okay. If you're Elon Musk, by all means, don't worry about it. You got a guy to pay and you're already working, 100 hours a week, every single week. Fine. How many of you are actually in that position? And for all the people complaining about all this, I never find one in that position. Not one, not ever. Right. But somehow or another, all of these things are too great an impetus. It's too big of an ask.
It's the coward's way out.
Indeed. And oh man, years ago, I was harping on cowardice and I shouldn't have stopped. There's a simple reality that almost all of modernity's problems would be solved by a little bit of courage.
I feel like that's a good closing line. There was one about something about fucking nerds earlier, and I thought that was pretty good, but that one is excellent. So I hear you might be doing some things unofficially.
Rumble.com/plebmedia. There is content again. One video a week. Dear locals, this is a terrible week to say this because I know I'm late. Video coming. But Locals exists. It is set at $2 a month, as cheap as you possibly can be. You will get content ahead of everybody else. Clearly not a week ahead of everybody else. But, what are you going to do? You will absolutely get it first. I put together a video for this week, and then I decided at the last minute that I should not release it. So I needed to come up with something else. I think I've got that. It should be out no later than tomorrow. It'll probably just get published at the exact moment I upload it because it's already late. But that said, it is some 10,000-foot view of these discussions. There's not a lot of minutia involved, and intentionally so. There are some examples, but, Justin and I get into it a lot more than I even possibly could in a ideally not longer than 20-minute video. But, I set a 20-minute limit for myself and immediately recorded a 22-minute video. What are you going to do?
20-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, everybody make sure you check that out. I am working on a Substack that we have sort of loosely referenced to a little bit here and there throughout this because we had a conversation about some of what I'm writing about before we started. So that should be coming out also no later than tomorrow if I don't fall asleep. It's been a wild day, but I'm glad that it was a wild day because it gave me an opportunity to think about a lot of things and get some ideas for stuff that I'm writing about and other stuff that I'm working on over the next couple weeks. Don, thank you again. As always, it's been a pleasure. Everybody go follow Don's stuff, and I will see you all next time. Later.